So, what exactly do you mean when you say, what do you mean?
I do not understand this. This really confuses me.
What's that supposed to mean?
Literally.
What's that supposed to mean?
What's that supposed to mean?
I don't know what you're talking about.
What are you talking about?
What's that supposed to mean?
Cultural anthropologist Ujwal Arkalgud and MotivBase president Jason Partridge will tell you that perception and meaning are the primary pressure points that shape and create the world we live in.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word.
Let's explore why meaning matters.
I don't think it means what you think it means.
Now, here's your host, Erin Trafford.
Episode 5, Season 2, Why Meaning Matters. Welcome into the show that aims to answer the question in the name. I am joined, of course, by my good pals, Jason and Ujwal of MotivBase. And we left off the last episode talking about, we talked about a lot in the last episode. We talked about the meaning of skin health, the changing meaning of health as it pertains to how we present ourselves in the world. But it took a really interesting turn in the conversation when we started to look at how when we examine deep healing and we make choices about being healthy, there's actually an element of altruism. There's an element of thinking beyond ourselves now. And this is a new kind of trend that we're seeing develop, especially in the post-pandemic world. So you have done a recent report in collaboration with Nielsen IQ that uncovered some really interesting insights. So I just let's unpack that. Like, what was the report about? Like, what spurred you to do it? And then B, what did you find as it pertains to the meaning of wellness?
Yeah, so Nielsen was doing this massive study, global study on health and wellness and some of the critical factors impacting it. And then they uncovered that there was this whole thing going on around altruism, specifically, what and why should we help others when it comes to health and wellness. And that piece, of course, is always difficult to get data on by talking to consumers, right? Because, obviously we tend to over-exaggerate the good things we do, especially if we're asked questions around it. And so for that, they came to us, and we're already a partner of theirs, and they asked us if we could decode some of the implicit meaning around altruism or altruistic purpose when it comes to health and wellness. So that's really how this whole thing came about. It's really cool that we got to feed into this, and we ended up doing research in the UK and the US because the timeline was really tight, but we got that done, and we actually uncovered, I'll start with this piece, Americans far more altruistic than the British when it comes to health and wellness. I was actually surprised by that, especially given all the, dismal news that we hear every day, right? Coming from the States. I was surprised by that. I think many of our clients are surprised to see that as well. But when you take a step back, it actually makes a lot of sense.
So what do you mean when you say, though, what do you mean when you say altruism? Like, let's define the concept. What does it mean?
Yeah, fundamentally, it's, when it comes to our health and wellness, it's the consumer or it's human beings recognizing that for our own betterment, for our own mental health and physiological health, we also need to do something for other people.
Got it.
So it's important to understand that I'm doing something for other people because ultimately I think it'll come back to me, right? Impact me. Not in terms of, giving me symbolic capital around the dinner table, but in terms of literally giving me good health karma, let's put it that way.
Okay. Jason, what were you going to say? Sorry,
I was just saying that I'm sure there's a joke about British food being the reason for kind of the lack of altruism. That's right. Okay. But that joke really wasn't worth it. It is interesting, though. We go back to this notion of everything's interconnected. And when we kind of began on this journey with Nielsen, we didn't know what we were going to find. And I think that as we kind of started to look at these associations that people are making, the emerging understanding that we need to be more aware of that we're all in this together when it comes to a health and wellness standpoint. There's some really interesting areas that are starting to present themselves. And one of the things that I love about what we do is we do work And then you can't help but start to see these moments in culture that present themselves that kind of validate what we were seeing starting to emerge. So, we do this project with Nielsen. We see that this whole idea of mental health advocacy is starting to kind of really come into fruition, right? And you think about, kind of the taboo of mental health, and we all know kind of, where we were kind of 20 years ago, never mind 10 years ago, never mind 5 years ago. But what does it mean when something starts to really kind of crest and become prominent in culture? And, so I'm sitting here Sunday morning and I'm watching NFL Fox, and I'm watching them talk about Calvin Ridley from the Atlanta Falcons, who has decided to step away from the football team for the year because he really needs a mental break. He needs to take time away to himself. This is perhaps the most masculine of sports. This is one of the most American of sports. And meanwhile, you've got these icons of the sport talking about their full support and starting to reveal themselves issues they've had with depression, starting to reveal issues themselves that they've had in regards to not having supports back in their day, and how we need to change things and how we need to be able to understand and take care of ourselves. So here's just a tiny instance where we start to see that altruism come to life. We start to see that, this trickle of a few people starting to kind of reveal something is now starting to become something that has become very prolific in, what essentially is modern day gladiators that are, kind of trained in order to be completely impervious to pain and impervious to kind of, weakness. But that in and of itself was just something that just made me go, oh my God, here's just another little proof point that shows what's happening and kind of how this altruism is starting to present itself in health and wellness.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, the reason why it's altruistic is the fact that we are embracing other people's need for mental health and wellness.
100%.
Right? And the one key area where this connects is in particular elderly care, and in particular with people who are living in long-term care facilities. And of course, a lot of people have family members who are in these facilities. A lot of people are just, I think, now awakening to a reality where they're realizing, especially through the pandemic, that the elderly in our society have sort of been relegated to a life where they're supposed to survive, not thrive. And that's changing, and that's part of the altruistic purpose, is how do I help the older members of our society thrive? Their job isn't to survive. Our job isn't to help them survive. Our job is to help them thrive. And mental health is a significant component of that, especially as we age. So that was something that really jumped out, both in the UK and in the US. That's the altruistic side of this, is I'm thinking about these things as it impacts other people.
What else did you uncover from the research that maybe surprised you?
Another one was, this whole idea of aging, again, connects to elderly care, but aging is another one where the notion of dignity has become a really critical piece, and the pandemic again has really exposed that idea. So, I'll give you an example of what dignity means. Having long-term care facilities where there is outdoor space, where somebody who's maybe not the most mobile can still enjoy fresh air, can socialize, can meet other people from their communities. It's little examples like these. These are specific examples that consumers themselves bring up and discuss in the context of senior citizens, because they're saying these are some of the things that we've been deprioritizing in society, and we need to reprioritize them again with this intention that we need to be able to thrive as we age. Aging is not the enemy, because we're all going to age. It's inevitable. And I think that's very, very cool to see. It really surprised us. And, where the distinction lies between the US and the UK is, in the UK, part of it, the consumer just sees their job as just showing up. Part of it is, if I have a grandmother in elderly care, I just need to show up. In the US, it's a bit more involved in the sense of, how do I volunteer? Maybe I take somebody to the bank because they need to run an errand. Maybe I run errands for them. Maybe I go hang out with them. Maybe we play, chess outside, on the street or in or in a park or what have you. It's a bit more involved in the US than it is in the UK, but fundamentally the meanings are the same.
This is fascinating. So if I'm sitting here listening to this, and the report is publicly available, right? I can find this on your LinkedIn page, and we can put it in the show notes as well. But here's what I'm hearing. If I'm running a corporation or an organization and I'm looking at our health and wellness program, part of it might be, hey, do you have a grandma or a grandpa who's nearby in a long-term care facility? Take a Friday a month and go hang out with them.
Yeah.
Because that's good for you, that's good for her, that's just 100%. Good overall. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Building on that point, it's interesting because one of the other areas that we saw was this notion of healthy eating for all. And again, this ties into this notion of aging with dignity, because if you're a food company and you're thinking about kind of the role of a decline in accessibility and how that may actually provide opportunities from a food innovation standpoint, it starts to open up areas of opportunity that are going to increasingly become relevant for consumers. Whether or not you're that, kind of son or daughter that's buying food for the parent or grandparent, or you're the actual kind of the elderly person thinking themselves. But I remember, and I think back to that kind of that moment where we realized, you know what? We're going to have to think about unplugging my grandmother's oven, because it's getting to the point now where her using it is she forgetting to turn it off, and is it becoming a safety issue? But what does that mean? Does that mean that every meal has to be made in the microwave? Does that mean that every meal is highly processed, or is there solutions or ways that we can think about feeding her in a way that kind of maintains that dignity but also gives her that access to healthy food? Of course, this isn't just about the elderly. This is about marginalized communities, or communities that are living under the poverty line, that either kind of don't have the money to access the healthy food that they need, or don't have access from a geographical standpoint. So, again, the big thing here is that this is important from a sense of altruism, because what people are starting to realize is that these limitations to some are having a bigger impact on the collective and the whole, and therefore are coming back and having a negative impact on me. If we don't solve to help people have access to healthy food, it has an impact on the health system. It has an impact on us as a collective and a society. It has an impact on how we get along together. It pulls apart the social bonds that basically kind of are holding us together. So we need to be more aware of these, and we need to work better together to solve these problems, because it will make my life better as well.
Ujwal, final word to you on altruism and health.
Yeah, one of the huge opportunities emerging through the pandemic is actually to serve accessible, nutritionally dense foods to the lower middle class and lower income groups in America. All CPGs are so focused on the upper tiers, on going slightly more gourmet, on going slightly more sort of, let's call it upper tier, or trying to increase their margins. Nobody's looking at a huge gap at the ground level with a lot of these communities. I would love to do a full episode on this, because we've got so much research, and there's a lot of interesting gaps, not just in terms of access for kids of parents who, let's say work 3 shift jobs and struggle to put nutritionally dense foods in their kids' mouths, but also gaps in terms of the way the school system delivers food as well. So we should definitely take this easily for a whole other episode.
Yeah, let's do that. Because right now I want to move on, because you just said 2 words that I want to pull a thread there. You talked about kids and you talked about ground level, and we're talking about nutrition and how the meaning of what is nutritious has changed, which means I want to move on to the next episode and talk about cows. I want to talk about beef. I want to talk about cows. I want to talk about protein. This is why meaning matters. If you have a comment or a question for us, feel free to drop us an email at hello@storystudionetwork.com, and make sure you like and subscribe, follow along with the show, and share it with your friends and colleagues. And don't forget to leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts. That goes a long way to helping the show grow. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to Why Meaning Matters with Ujwal Arkalgud, Jason Partridge, and your host, Erin Trafford.
Inconceivable! You keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Why Meaning Matters is produced for MotivBase and the Story Studio Network by iContact Productions.